And we can't forget the message the Chapitos sent in one of their many letters, where they said they didn't produce any Fanta and weren't leaders of anything, that they never partnered with anyone who worked with Fanta, and then the banners they hung in several states trying to look good with the government, warning that no one should dare work with Fanta, strictly prohibiting it. For what? To do what Pocha's letter said, earn points with the prosecutor's office to get them to be more lenient. Here, I am going to show on the screen the letter from the Chapitos and some images of the blankets they hung up. Another sacrifice by the Chapitos to look good with the government was this young man, Brandon Nazario, who was arrested in May of 2024 in Culiacan. They handed him over in the same way.
Fuerte golpe al cártel del Pacífico, en especial a los Chapitos. Autoridades detuvieron a Brandon Nazario N., alias el Catrín. Este sujeto es el supuesto operador de varios narcolaboratorios en Culiacán, y de acuerdo con las investigaciones, abastecía a las facciones de este cártel. Elementos de la Guardia Nacional, así como del Ejército, realizaron un operativo en conjunto en Los Olivos, al norte de Culiacán. Durante la detención, en la que no se reportó ningún enfrentamiento, autoridades aseguraron 2 armas de fuego, diversos cargadores y cartuchos, así como 1000 pastillas de fentanilo. El Catrín es señalado por la producción de fentanilo, así como el tráfico de estupefacientes hacia Estados Unidos.
There you go, another medal for the Chapitos. But the same thing always happens. The bosses hype people up to make them seem like they were important players and leaders, etc., etc. But the reality is that this Brandon Nazario was nothing like what was said in the video, just a scapegoat hyped up to make the government look good. Another positive for the Chapitos was that thanks to his statements, they were able to extradite Sergio Vega. He had been detained since 2019 without being extradited, but since Ratoncito made his statements about what Sergio did, they were able to get the extradition order. Here on the screen, I'm showing you the image of who I'm talking about, also known as the Latigo, the Suegro, or Don David. One more of the positives for the Chapitos was that Joaquin surrendered to the U.S. government in July of 2024. And lastly, the biggest positive of all was that the Chapitos handed over the Yoma as a gift to the U.S. security agencies in El Paso, Texas. Very well. These are some of the things that the Chapitos have done in their role as collaborators with the U.S. government. And as you saw at the beginning of this episode, it is mentioned that Ovidio, Joaquin, and Nestor are about to sign their plea agreements. But what is a plea agreement? I'm going to tell you so you can understand it perfectly. A plea agreement is between the defendant and the prosecution, where the defendant agrees to plead guilty to some or all of the charges against them. Why do they do this? Very well. Well, this is in exchange for concessions from the prosecution. Some of these concessions can be reduced charges and also a recommendation for a lighter sentence. The main purpose of this agreement is to avoid a trial. This way, by not going through the entire trial process, both parties benefit. The accused might receive a more lenient sentence, and the prosecution saves time and resources by resolving the case faster. Let me give you an example. If the defendants went to trial with the charges they have and lost, they would get life in prison, just like what happened to Pocha. But with this agreement and avoiding trial, they could get 20, 25, or 30 years, depending on the case. Very good. We're on the right track so far. Now let's move on to what most people from Sinaloa do, which is collaborate. All right. Well, in these agreements, they add a cooperation annex if they agree to cooperate, obviously, and this becomes a cooperation agreement. And here, I will tell you why. There is a segment called plea agreements and plea agreement supplements, which mentions that in light of safety concerns for defendants in criminal proceedings, law enforcement officers, and court staff, the court will implement a procedure to uniformly handle plea agreements so that the public on the internet cannot identify cooperating defendants. Plea agreements should no longer identify if a defendant has agreed to cooperate with the government of the United States. A second document, titled Supplement to the Plea Agreement. It must be filed under seal, along with each plea agreement. If a defendant has agreed to cooperate, the supplement to the plea agreement must contain the cooperation agreement. If the defendant and the United States government have not reached a cooperation agreement, the supplement to the plea agreement will indicate that no such agreement exists. All plea agreements and supplements to plea agreements must be filed before the change of plea hearing. The agreement may include protection measures for the accused and their family, such as relocation or entering the witness protection program. The legal obligations are that the defendant must agree to plead guilty to some charges as part of the agreement. Also, the defendant waives certain rights, such as the right to a jury trial if they decide to cooperate. Now, if the defendant does not fulfill their part of the agreement, or if it is discovered that they have lied or withheld information, the prosecution can void the agreement, resulting in a much harsher sentence. Here, I will show you an example of a plea deal to give you an idea of what it might include. This one that I'm going to present to you is in English, but here I'm going to try to provide you with information that can lead to a plea agreement that goes from waiving your right to a trial by a jury predetermined by the appropriate people. And you waive that right, but it also gives you other obligations and rights. And there are many points, technicalities from lawyers that I might not know, and that may be unknown to many of us, right? But basically, that's it. They explain it to you point by point. What they will allow you, what you will give up. How is the plea agreement? You have to plead guilty to certain charges. How many charges? Which ones? The prosecutors. Here appear the obligations of the prosecutors, and also what it can. The things you can let go, and that might make your case fall apart. This is an agreement. And that's it, friends. Here we are going to continue with the topic. Obviously, friends, this is a simple case of a person caught crossing the border with goods. Nothing to do with the high-profile cases of these three young people we're talking about. Now, here is something that was just revealed to me by a very close source to this case and has everyone involved very nervous. And this is why everything about this matter is so secretive. The detail is that the agreement between the Zapatos and the United States government is hanging by a thread, and it's very fragile because it has many fluctuations and risks of collapsing. But why is this? Here I'll explain a bit. As you know, on July 25th was the Yoma incident. But as you know, that day Malesio Quinn was resigned. And after that, Yoma's bodyguards also were resigned. Well, I spoke with an agent and also with the former prosecutor, and they explained that the issue is that an informant cooperating or someone with a deal with the government is subject to certain rules, and one of them is that the United States government neither allows nor condones an informant or collaborator to commit acts of violence like special treatments and resignations. Although a collaborator may engage in illegal activities under supervision to maintain their facade, let's call it that, serious crimes like resignations are neither allowed nor forgiven under collaboration laws. So, if a collaborator commits a resignation, they can face charges, and their collaboration might not excuse them from legal responsibility for that act, since informants and collaborators are given clear and precise instructions on what they can and cannot do. If an informant does one of these things while collaborating with the government, the prosecutor can request a reduction in their sentence. But that does not completely exempt the informant from legal responsibility for acts of violence committed. So, let's see what's going to happen in the courts, because the Zapatos are cooperating with the government and at the same time are resigning people and committing acts of violence. I was told that one of the strategies they want to follow is to say that when all these acts were committed, Joaquin had not signed any agreement, and there was no legal basis. Later, they formalized the agreement signed by both parties, and that's where they will start from. That's why they say the Zapatos tell everyone they don't want a war, that they won't fight, and that they pretend to carry on with their normal lives without being prepared or organized. But the reality is that they are very well prepared and organized, and they've already given clear orders, even if others say otherwise. That's completely false. As I've already told you, on the 27th and 28th of July, the commanders had a meeting and were given orders to guard the territories carefully, to let no one in, and to locate the people from the sombreros. 2 weeks later, they were given the order to identify key figures and resign them. Well, I think that might be a bit redundant. I just want to make it clear that this is the main reason the Zapatos are acting this way. The deals with the government dictate that they can't commit acts of violence, but what the people I interviewed told me is that they can defend themselves if attacked. Pretending they're protecting their lives, but they shouldn't be acting. Because that could be interpreted differently and put the whole cooperation at risk. And, well, As we already know, it seems the Yoma lawyers will file a complaint against Joaquin and his brothers for the nap kidding, and you've seen that the Mexican prosecutor's office is accusing Joaquin of treason to his country. So, all these variables affect the process, which is why it's being handled so secretly. It's too complex. On the same day, they commit international nap kidding, treason, mayor nap kidding, and special treatment. Then 2 people resigning, and the resignation of a political leader. Now they are also involving Ovidio in this conspiracy matter, because this act was done by several people, and it all started with Ovidio. But if this is the case, they should also involve Ovidio's lawyer, because he was the one who transmitted all of Ovidio's messages to Joaquin, so they should be fair about that. All of this is really serious, and don't think this was collateral damage, as some people call it. But it was a very well-defined strategy to get the United States government on their side and take over Sinaloa. But as I said, it's going to be a mess, and everyone's going to try to get what they can out of it. In the end, the effect of this collaboration will be devastating for the Sinaloa organization. The information provided by these men will allow the authorities to launch operations against other members of telCar, decapitating and dismantling important networks, and further weakening the Sinaloa organization. Additionally, the perceived betrayal by some of its former allies has created internal divisions that could lead to more clashes and an eventual fragmentation of the Sinaloa organization. Why do I say that everyone will take what they can from this? On one hand, what will the government get? Obviously, the more people they implicate, the better for them. The more information they provide, the more charges they can bring. Those in prison will get benefits and lighter sentences. Those in Sinaloa will try to clear their path by removing those who stand in their way. For those who it doesn't help, and who will get a bit more time, because in the end, no matter the deals and arrangements they have with the government will eventually come after them. That's inevitable. And don't tell me that they will only talk about whoever they want, because cooperation isn't like that. You have to answer, as I already told you. When I talk to you about the plea deal or cooperation, you have to tell the truth about what they ask you. You can't say that you'll talk about this one and not that one, because if the prosecution takes it as if you didn't want to talk about things you do know, the charges will be severe. This only applies to Raton and Nini because they were extradited. So they have to spill everything without holding back anything, even if it's about their family. Joaquin's case is different. Since he surrendered, he can negotiate and say, I'm only going to tell you about these people or those people, but I won't talk about my family. He could negotiate that, and he's the only one who can. That's why in trials, when they're questioning a witness, they ask, "What is your obligation?" And they answer, "My entire obligation is to tell the truth, and I cannot lie." That was the agreement I made with the government of the United States, and it was seen in Pocha's trial. Many witnesses said that phrase, and I think many of you have seen it in movies when they testify. They make an oath by raising their right hand and saying, "Do you swear to tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth?" And what do those who are testifying say? "Yes, I swear." That's why I'm telling you it's going to be a mess, because Ovidio is definitely going to talk about his brothers and all their businesses. Just like Joaquin is going to talk about Panu, or Jose Angel, Javier Leon, Jorge Caro, and their friends, man-gun, enemies, and obviously the government and the governor, most of all. As I already told you, what happened with the chain? The Chapitos put Nini. The government didn't keep their promise to resign him. They captured him. The Chapitos tried to get Nini resigned in Altiplano, and this is 100% confirmed. His head had a price. Why do you think Nini cried for them to take him to the United States? But everyone was confirming what Piyuyi said in the voice note and in his song that Nestor made, saying he's 100% with the Chapitos and blah, blah, blah. All of that was lies. Of course, Nini said that, and he will keep doing it as part of his strategy so his whole family doesn't get resigned. And I'm not talking about his wife. I mean his mom, dad, siblings, you name it, etc. But as I say, the chain continues. The Nini will talk about all his people from 27, Piyi, Piyuyi, and Narquitos Toys. I'm talking about Ramos, Flaquito, every single one of them. And with time, you'll see I'm right. So don't stress. Everything will come to light, and everything will be known. It's completely inevitable. And you see, Joaquin's strategy of not being mentioned in the corridos didn't help him at all, did it? You noticed that many corridos only mentioned Ivan, Alfredo, and Ovidio. He didn't like to hang out with people in that scene, and he tried to stay under the radar, but none of that worked for him. He still got the same charges, and now he has the same problems. This goes to show that in the end, none of that works, because eventually, someone will come out and tell things as they really are. Sooner or later, it always happens. Well, here we are, friends. Those who said they couldn't stand the informants and would resign them, along with their families because they thought they were so tough, look at how they ended up like most, talking and fighting to be the best collaborators for the U.S. government. Please make them good corridos because, as I told you months ago, they are now part of the snitch cartel, and apparently they are quickly moving up the ranks. Their collaboration has had a significant impact on the cartel and on public perception. It's like everything. Some are in favor and believe they've done what was necessary to survive. Well, to get out of prison and have a life. And others see their cooperation as a betrayal to the organization. But that's the way this business is, and for better or worse, legally, Ovidio, Joaquin, and Nini hope that their cooperation will allow them to receive lighter sentences. And although not all the details of the agreements with the prosecution have been made public, it is speculated that they could enter the witness security program known as WITSEC, where El Chino Antrax, the Flores twins from Chicago, El Tigrillo Arellano, and many more have gone into hiding. And speaking about this witness protection program, I want to clarify something. There are many media outlets circulating this news that I'm about to present, which says that Ovidio has entered the witness protection program. All right. There are people who assume this is false because he has not been sentenced yet. Let me tell you that's not true because you can join the program without being sentenced. Just to clarify, it is not a requirement to be sentenced, and I confirm this for you. Also, it's false that you need a judge's authorization or order. The judge has nothing to do with that, just so you know. I'm not saying Ovidio has already entered the program, just clarifying that you can join the program without being sentenced. And later we'll delve into these topics a bit more because I'll make an episode for you, just like the one about the lookouts. I'll make one about informants, what they receive, what they do, etc. Well, before I go, let me tell you one more thing about the cooperation of these individuals with the prosecution. It does not guarantee full immunity as they still face serious cases in Mexico. This type of cooperation has been seen hundreds of times, but it has never been free of legal risks that could complicate their legal situation in other countries. However, if they enter the witness protection program, then yes, 100%, no other government can touch them. So, in conclusion, what can I say? This that is happening is nothing new, but it is very important because, as I said, It could change the course of the Sinaloa cartel, and it is a game that has been played for decades. Like these people can resign people on U.S. soil. And they can fill the streets with resignings for overdoses. Informants can be resigned, but it is all part of the never-ending chain I mentioned, as they are going to arrive in the United States, and they are going to talk. And this way, accusations will be made against many more people. This game has no end. As always, there are more questions than answers, but here, I try to help you understand these topics better. What is happening and what could happen so that you learn about this world. For today, we have reached the end of this episode. I hope you liked it and learned something as you know. Leave me your questions in the comments, and I will answer them little by little. And do not miss any episode. You know it, the unique and real narrative of the Ocran world can only be found here. I say goodbye with a big hug and see you in the next episode.